Hey, peace, people. This is Sue, aka Desaline, or just Shah. Oh, I forgot Mean Nice and my thousand other names, but whatever. How you feeling? How you feeling, Nate?
I'm feeling good, Sue. What's going on, brother?
Man, nothing. And welcome to episode 12 of Politics, as usual.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yep,
12.
yep. Let's roll. And this is under Always for Black. And let me just explain Always for Black real quick. Black is an acronym for Building Lives Through Awareness and Conscious Knowledge. And also the always means that there's many different ways you can be for our people. It's not just one idea. You can contribute to the cause many different ways. And it's many different ideas. We're not always going to agree. So that's why it's Always for Black. That's what it stands for. And of course, we're not hating on anybody else, any other group, but as many of you know, us in the Black community, because of our history and our experience and stuff that have been done with us, we have a unique set of problems that need to be addressed. And one of these problems is the education system right now. And Brother Nate is an expert in this field. He studied for years on end on education. He got the degrees and just self-studying as well. So through most of this conversation, I'm going to let him guide this conversation. I read up, but he's more the expert than me. So I'm just going to ask him some questions about where we need to go with education. And hopefully my cat is not tripping today because I already hear him meowing. I don't know what he wants. He's fed. Like, I blame my wife because she babies the cat. So hopefully he don't mess up the video, but anyway, let's get it started.
Let's go.
All right. So as you see it right now, I want you to identify some of the problems when it comes to public education before higher education, because right now, seeing that all the focus is on higher education, we have free college proposals, and I'm for that. It's all good. That's excellent. However, there are severe problems before we even get to higher education. And in your opinion, what are some of the major problems you see in public education as it stands right now?
Yeah, public education as it stands right now, Brother Sue, I would definitely have to say innovation is the issue. And the reason why I'm saying innovation is the issue now, and I know we're probably going to get to it a little later, but you have all of these different schools that are popping up. You have your private schools where people do vouchers for those schools. You have your charter schools that popping up left and right. And each of the charter schools have their own focus. Well, what are those charter schools doing? They're picking an area and they're focused on it, right? They're using innovation. Where in our public school model, it's still an old model. It's still like a 19th century, if you think about 19th century, 20th century model that we're trying to use to get us to get us going in the 21st century. And that's the issue. Like I said, I was reading something earlier, getting ready for the show, and I was looking at where we're at in math, and we know that math is everything, right? We know that the future is moving through tech. So math and science is where it's at. And we're ranked, 38th in math in the world, far as the United States. And then we're also ranked 24th in science. That's an issue. And being that our country uses the most technology, I think, out of any, there may be a few countries who are more, have more technology than we do, but now, we even going into the smart refrigerators and smart televisions and smart this, smart that. And we have all of this good information, all this good technology, but we're not graduating our children out of school. And we're also graduating our children who are just going to college. And I know we're going to talk about that a little later. Either they don't finish college or they finish college and they're getting a degree that really should be phased out right now in our 21st century job market. So we're preparing children for jobs that are no longer there versus preparing children for jobs that are for the future, if that makes sense. I mean, I'm talking about even jobs that haven't even been created yet. In our public educational setting, we don't do that as a whole, and we're not doing that as a whole. Now, part of that issue could be with public education, you have to have a school board. With a school board, you typically have politicians who are trying to work their way up to that other, and we talk about a lot of local government here on this show. So let's go to the basics here. Most people run for school board so they can kind of get a precursor into, oh, now I want to be a city councilman or a county councilman. Oh, I want to run for mayor, or I want to run for a state Congress seat or a state Senate seat. I'm sorry, a state representative seat. So now you have people who are in education who are helping pushing that school district's policy, who may not be well versed in education, but they're doing it on the basis of they're really trying to get their political career started versus educating children. And I know that's a lot to kind of come out the gate with, Sue. I know that's loaded, but I think in the forefront, if I could just narrow it down, it would definitely be, if I had to choose two of my top issues, it would have to be we lack innovation in our public educational setting. And number two, the way we govern our schools are a little bit outdated and old, and there's no accountability there. Because every some odd years, you get to vote in a new school board member. And guess what? If a child is in that district for 12 years and they done had over 4 different school board members and that child's still failing, who's really being held accountable?
Right. And here locally, I know on our school board, you heard of Carl Paladino?
Yes. Yes.
Unfortunately, he's on our school board here. And that's a major problem because he's a proven racist. I mean, he's just proven, not even speculation. Not throwing the word around loosely. I mean, proven.
Right.
And it's really unfortunate we have somebody like him on the board. And in a lot of these cities, you have people like that on the board, but they might just be a little bit better at hiding it. They might not just express it the way he's expressed it, but they still might have the same sentiments. You mentioned a lot of things there. I just want to touch on a few things. You mentioned kind of math, science, and how we behind. And STEM is the way of the future right now. We talk about automation. And I was just reading an article between 2000 and 2014, the percentage of Black people that got degrees increased 60%. However, it didn't go up at all in the STEM field.
Right, absolutely.
And most of the degrees, a good portion of degrees that we are getting, our people are getting, is like social work degrees, which is nothing wrong with that. If that's your passion, go ahead. But at the same time, I think we need diversity of where we get degrees at. It's good. It is good to get social work. It's good to go into government, but we still need to get STEM. We need entrepreneurs. We need Black people in all these different industries. And right now, we're not seeing that happen. We just did a story on our podcast yesterday, Always Black podcast, about Neo raising $2.3 million and giving it to a school in San Francisco to try to get diversity into engineering, which we gave them props with that. But at the same time, it's something that we gonna have to do and make a priority to get Black people in these fields. And that's one thing. You mentioned charter schools. And I know that's been a big debate among people. So I know some people think it's not fair that some charter schools don't have the same requirements as public schools. And some people think they cherry pick the students of who they get. And I guess some charter schools are not performing any better than some of these public schools either. I guess it depends on the charter school you go to. So can you just expand and touch on the whole charter school, public school divide right now?
Right. So there's a big push. So what we see, especially with our Secretary of Education right now, who's definitely a pro charter school or a private school person with vouchers and all of that, which we'll get into that later. But the difference with a charter school is this. If you're in your area And if your school is not providing a adequate education, free and appropriate education for your child, the community, as well as other people, have the right to then write their state petition. In every state, charters are open. You have the right to write your proposal and to create a charter school. But it has to show that you're offering something different from the traditional public educational setting. So, i.e., like what we talked about earlier, innovation. So you have charter schools with all these different focuses. So I know one charter school that just opened up here that's pretty big. It's a sports charter school, believe it or not. It's a charter school just for athletes, where some of the top kids kind of in the state, they want to go there, and their academics is literally done, I think, like at 12 o'clock, 12:30. And they literally, oh yeah, I mean, they get their academics out early, then they're on to their practices, on to their focus, and all of that. So, and that's just one example. But yes, a lot of the other charter school follow this thing called the KIPP model, where Ron Clark's kind of model, he kind of created his own school, but people follow that very rigid preparatory. Matter of fact, they always call it prep. So they really prep kids to get towards college. And that's their focus, getting them college ready, and having them be college bound. So with charter, so you have that. Now, you could have a public charter partnership with a school district. School districts can partner up with a charter school to say, hey, these kids live in these neighborhood zones here. We will accept all of those students, no matter what. We will partner up with your district. They can come here. That's a public charter. So I'm more for the public charters personally, because it still fits that public school model versus just a straight up charter where they're like, actually, you have to apply to come here. And like what you talked about earlier, you get to cherry pick which student get to come in and all of this stuff, and what families you have come in, your data, you get to be skewed and all of that stuff. But you have two types of charters. You have your private type of charter, and you have your public partnership type of charter, which is a normal neighborhood community school. But the difference is the school boards do not govern over charter schools. Charters have their own operating boards, if that makes sense. Principals in charter schools have the ability to fire a teacher, where in public schools, and this is where the big pushback is coming at, teachers don't have those rights, because when you sign that contract, you know you're signing an at-will contract, and if it's not working out on both sides, you can terminate the agreement. Where you have the teachers unions and all that stuff, they're in the public sector, if that makes sense. But in the charter arena, you don't have that protection. Now, I would like to throw this out here. I am a proponent of public education. I like public education, but I understand that we got to make some changes, or if not, we're losing generations of children within this current public educational system. Now, I say that to say this, Sue. Last year, I read a report. There's only 1% of teachers in public school that get evaluated as being poor and ineffective teachers. Only 1%. I know there's more than 1%.
Right.
And,
I have more than 1% of the teachers I had in my life.
Right. So when you say, what's the big argument? The argument is teachers are not as protected in that charter model. It's more of a business model, to where you have to produce and put out, or if you don't do that, you can't hide, and a school moves you. So for example, if you have a poor teacher, and this happens a lot and it's sad, but if you have a poor teacher in a school, somebody might document on that teacher, but you know what they do to that teacher at the end of the year? They move them to the school where the students need the most attention, because they know that in those schools, parents are not as savvy, number one, and number two, parents are not that engaged in the process. Like, I've literally interact with different people, and I've had parents tell me straight out, oh yeah, that's a good teacher because she don't call me. Now, our parents have to be help educated. Just because somebody's not calling you about your child, that's not necessarily meaning that this is the best teacher for your child, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that's the big riff right there, Sue, when you're talking about charter versus public. Public, you're protected by the teachers union. You're protected by so much. Charter, you're not protected anymore as a teacher or principal.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's interesting. That interesting. So a public charter is kind of the model you going towards. How many? I don't know if you would know this off the top of your head because I don't know. I'm just curious. How many of these public charter models do you see?
I only see in my area, there's only one. There's not many. The public charter is up and is new. And the reason why it's newer, because people are saying like, hey, wait a minute. You're saying you're creating this, but you get to dictate what students come through your door versus us. We got to take everybody because we're a public school.
Right.
So now what you're seeing is more charter companies. And I hate to say it that way, but what you'll find is people are invested in charter schools. People are invested in incorporate, making it private, and they will literally go out and help groups and people start their charters, if that makes sense. So what I'm seeing that these companies start to do now a little bit is say, hey, we need to make these public charters so we can show that our model works everywhere versus we get to cherry pick our students and our families.
And where does the funding come from charter schools? Let's just say we use this public charter model.
Yep.
Where would the funding come from for the school?
Now, if you're using, so this is the difference. So you're asking two questions.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're using the public charter model, a lot of those funds will come from the school district. Whatever that school district is,
Mm-hmm.
that school district will then help fund that charter school. Now, that charter school will also be funded by the private sector as well, too. So there's usually money people or people behind that charter school that's putting money into that school. Now, in a straight up just charter school, it's going to be your money people. It's going to be either your corporation who have started this charter school and they're now like a company who start charter schools, or it can be somebody who's a philanthropist. It can be somebody who has a lot of money and who just say, hey, I want to put $5 million into this project. Let's make it happen because I mean, you're a nice guy. I like you. I like what you're doing. I have this money. Let's go start a school. And then they go get with other financial people like them to start to put money to keep the school running. So you have all of these money people at the table funding the school from the private sector. Yeah.
So they fund the school from year to year. So they get money people each year to get a certain amount of money.
Absolutely. Or they continuously make that it's an annual investment that they do. They run it almost like a private. You know, they get some, depending on your state, you can get some state funds per pupil, that's per student. So you get some state funds, but most of your funds come from the private sector.
Okay. I guess my question would be, what are some of these people getting out of it? I know there's some people that just really care about kids and really want to see education done right, but I don't think everybody that starts the school fits into that boat. So what are some of these people getting out of starting the school?
Well, this is why you got to be really careful about who started the school and what they're doing, because some people do it just for their own financial benefits. Because like I said, it's like a business. Ideally, I think most people, the more schools that they can open up, and I'm talking about these bigger charter school type companies, the more schools they open up, the more money that they can get and the more funders that they can get, and they can just keep it growing that way. That's why the voucher thing is big. You know, people are saying like, hey, why should I have to pay? And I'm paying taxes anyway. I don't want to send my child here. I want to send my child there. I should be able to get a voucher and pay my way through this school as well too. Or in your private school type setting, I don't want my child going here to a public school, but I pay taxes in this area. I should be able to get something to pay towards this tuition. And this is the big debate right now in education. The issue is right now, public education is just not faring too well. in this discussion. As we laid out those stats earlier. The issue is, where are we? And and I guess we'll talk about this a little later. But we're always for Black, so we're talking about African Americans particularly. Right now, where are we in education? We're losing. Prime example. I currently work in a public school, and today I played a little clip, about Harriet Tubman. We talked about a few things, which was good. Then we got into the money aspect of that, Harriet Tubman being on a $20 bill, but we got a little deeper, right? I asked my students, what does GDP stand for? And these are my middle school age students who should know.
Right.
They did not know what GDP. What's a stock? My students didn't know what's a stock. One of my students asked me, well, how do I create a bank account so I can then start to invest in stock? This was literally a conversation that I had today. We're not educating our children. This is what I'm trying to say. There is no way, and I have to take a little bit of that too. Hindsight 2020. I'm gonna go do this whole lesson now. I'm gonna teach economics for a whole week. I don't care. And I literally have to teach students about wealth, have to teach students how to manage wealth. We have to talk about stocks. We have to talk about what's a mutual fund. Like, I literally want to break it down to my students so they have it. And how did we get there, Brother Sue? I told them about 8 years ago when I was at the gym and I was working out and, going into the locker room, go shower up, all that stuff at the end. There was this older white guy in there with I would have to say it was his grandson, but it was like a white kid. He was probably 8. And he literally said, hey, granddaddy. He said, yeah, he did. It was his grandson. He said, granddaddy. He said, hey, granddaddy. He said, hey, when we go home, can we look at can we go online to see how my stocks did today?
Wow.
I was like, whoa. So that's how we even got into the conversation with my students. And my students who are 14, 13 years old didn't even know what a stock was.
Right. So they already starting off at a tremendous disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's deep right there. Man, there's so many questions to ask. Like you mentioned vouchers, and that's one thing that I think we need to get into. But before we get into that, I want to ask you about teachers.
Right.
Because we constantly hear that teachers are underpaid. So if you raise teachers' salary and make it a more lucrative field to get into, do you think that would make the difference, or you think that just be throwing the money at the problem without solving it?
Very good question. I think a little bit of both. I think that teacher salaries have to be raised because teachers, they do a lot. They put up with a lot. We can't get a president of the United States without a teacher. You can't have a lawyer without a teacher. You can't have a doctor without a teacher. Heck, you can't even go in the NBA without a teacher. And, I say that to say this. It should, in other countries, the teacher is held in the highest esteem, except our country, right? In a lot of different countries in Asia, in a lot of different places, the teacher is it. They're like, that's it. That's almost like God in their eyes, right?
Right.
And when we talk about it with the values there, I think if we raise their salary, get what I'm saying, we will then, okay, so let me back up a little bit. Charter schools have the ability to hire people who are not traditional teachers. Let me say this. If I am a person and I love math and I'm a mathematician and I don't necessarily have a teacher's degree, I would rather, if I'm a principal, I would rather hire that mathematician to teach my students than I would just somebody who's certified to teach math, if that makes sense. So right. If the money was better, people who go into other fields like engineering and things of that nature would want to take a teaching job, but they know financially it's not worth it for me to take this job because, you know what, I got to eat and I have a different type of lifestyle that I want. And I just don't want to work and pay bills and give back. Like, I literally want to live a little bit. Like, I want to buy a boat,
Right.
So I say all that, but I do think that in other countries, Brother Sue, that other people are doing, they're getting creative with that. So what they're doing is like certain things is teachers get certain loans, right? For living, for housing, or some of the newer teachers, younger teachers, they get to live in places like dormitory type setting to where they don't have to pay mortgage and rent while they get to save their money. So there's other things I believe that we can do to kind of deal with that versus just throwing money at the issue and paying somebody more. There's other programs we can do to attract better talent.
Yeah, and I think it's important because you want to actually attract people into the field. And the only way to really do that is to raise the pay, because I know there's a lot of teachers out there struggling. And you know, the pay is not the same. It depends on what district you go to, state, city. So it varies. Some teachers are doing better than others.
Right.
You know, because I know in some districts they get paid peanuts.
Right.
In certain districts.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. So now, how are districts and schools funded? Right.
Property taxes.
So if I live in an impoverished area or area where there's a lot of high poverty, the likelihood of my school district paying out boatloads of money without a federal government grant or something like that is slim to none.
Mm-hmm. That's true, and I think we can be innovative. We can do it with pay. I think that's something we gotta look at. Another thing we can look at is kind of giving them benefits like some people in the military have. I know some people might scoff at that, but I'm a veteran myself. I wouldn't be mad at that because you are serving the community. You are doing a service to the country.
Yeah.
And you want to get qualified people to get into this. Maybe use certain things you could do with interest rates when it comes to housing. Maybe you have loan forgiveness, or maybe if you're a teacher, you know, you could go to school for free, maybe something like a GI Bill that they get for the military. I know some people might think that's a little bit crazy or out and they shouldn't do it, but you got to think about it. These are the people you leaving your children with for, you know, a significant portion of the day. At certain times, that teacher might spend more time with your children than you do during a certain day. So you want to have the best people doing that job. So we have to come up with something creative to fix that particular problem as well.
Right.
And, you know, you actually want to get teachers that care as well, you know, and not disconnected. It's a lot of different things that can be done. I also think teachers need to really get familiar with the environment and the people in the neighborhood too, because you don't want to be disconnected. Because I see this a lot, because I went to a poorer school and a lot of teachers there just couldn't relate to us, you know, and you see this a lot, and it's just a massive disconnect. And if you don't have your students respect, you know, it's just going to be tough. It's going to be tough. So
no, I agree with that.
So, and I also want to get your opinion on vouchers. Like, I guess for me right now, I guess for the short term, I'm not against it because there's no reason a child should be stuck at a felon school. But as a long-term strategy, I just don't see how it's sustainable, because not every child is going to be able to get a voucher. You know, like, so we have to fix the underlying problem. I think vouchers are a band-aid that a lot of conservatives is going to, like, that fix the problem in public education in the inner city, which is it don't. I mean, it's great for those students that are able to get those vouchers out of that felon school, maybe, and go to a different school or better performing school. But what about all the children get stuck in that felon school?
Right. I agree with you there. Let's see how I feel about vouchers. I mean, I flat out just don't like vouchers, actually, now that I think about it. Only because I understand that the whole systems of vouchers is to only allow a few students to have the same educational rights as others. But not only that, too, people who don't qualify with vouchers will find a way to get vouchers to beat the system. And the major part about voucher is, and we just have to be 100% real right now, okay? Do I really want a bunch of Jaquans and Tyrones and all of them sitting in the classroom with Becky? No. And so that's just not, I just don't want that, because now, because our students, just like we see in other professions, other sports, and let's talk about NBA, NFL, all of that stuff, you might put them in a different environment, put them in a different school, but without working on the real social issues, there's going to be some trouble behind that. And what I mean by some trouble behind that, you just can't throw somebody in an environment and expect them to be different without really doing that work, getting to the root cause of, why do we have so much anger? Why do we have so much anxiety when it comes to school? So if you just throw them all in the same school, quickly those kids will be out of that school faster than you know it, because that's why people paying their money, so they don't have to deal with the typical public educational stuff. So the voucher system is already set up to where you're only going to let in a few anyway, and taxpayers are footing the bill for just one or two students receiving the services that a private school parent can give that student.
Yeah, I hear you. You hear my cat going ham in the background?
I hear it.
Man, like, I hope my wife hurry up and come home. And
yeah. I hear it. I was trying to block it out. I was like, this cat is like going off right now.
Yeah, man. Like, she babies that cat, man. Like, I can't even do a show piece.
Hey, man, the cat don't like vouchers, man.
Nobody like vouchers, right? But okay, I want to go back to the public charters.
Yep.
I got a question. Will it be pushback from, let's just say a charter school pop up in a certain district? Will the public school that already in that district will be pushback if you try to open a charter school in that same district and have that charter public partnership?
Oh yeah, that'd be pushback there. And the reason why that'd be pushback, because if you're taking away those students, you're taking away that money. Like, schools get money based on the number of students that they have, and especially when you're talking about certain it's called like Title I schools, where students are and the families are right at the poverty line, a little bit below, or just making ends meet, low income is the word they like to throw around now, all of that stuff. But there are federal funds that attach to that. So you would see that school start to suffer, because if I only have 100 students, and last year I had 500 students, my teaching staff and my program is going to look totally different versus the 100 students that I have. So it's like, how can I stay open? So that's the conflict right there.
Right.
Now, what you see happening, though, Brother Sue, is some districts, to get out of situations, will pretty much turn that school over to that charter school. So versus schools competing, they will literally say, hey, since this is a public charter school, we have a partnership. This is now the school that you're going to go to, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we just got to look at all options. And what's your opinion on homeschooling?
Personally, I mean, I think homeschooling is great, depending on who's at home with the child, who's pushing the child. Is that child intrinsically motivated? If you have an intrinsically motivated child or intrinsically motivated person who's sitting in front of that computer, because you can there's virtual schools everywhere. So you can literally go to virtual schools, and just like how we're chatting right now online, you can literally go to school that way. Because it may be that a child doesn't like the social atmosphere of school. So I believe homeschooling should be an option. If somebody would like to homeschool their child, or if a child would prefer that and it's going to work out, that's fine. But I definitely more of a proponent of school in that social setting, only because I believe being around people, working with people, learning how to work together, learning how to use collaboration to solve problems, is like the way that you're going to get those next level skills, if that makes sense. So definitely, though, not against homeschooling, but depending on who is monitoring that child during homeschooling. If you have a responsible parent, I am all for it. Who know curriculum, who know instruction, and who say, I don't want my child being subjected to this, and if I'm worried about bullying and all these other social aspects of school, I'm fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And how can we go about getting the classes or making the classes that need to be made in these schools? Because you were just mentioning about they didn't know about, basic economic stuff, and, they starting off at a disadvantage. How can we make that part of the curriculum?
Well, that's what we're talking about with the innovation part, right? So a school board would have to approve that. And honestly, superintendents are behind the 8 ball because they're responsible just for outcome number. So as far as the high school level, they're responsible for dropout rates, how many kids are graduating. On the elementary middle level, they're responsible for state test scores and also, whatever assessment they're using. So some people may use NEWA, some people may use MAP testing, whatever that state's using as their form to assess student growth and achievement. So that's what they're on. So do I want to teach economics, or do I need to make sure that I give my students another hour of ELA, which is English Language Arts now, or interventions that's dependent on English Language Arts. Now, if I'm creative and you allow me to, I can teach a language arts class by using the economy, by teaching English Language Arts, if I'm creative, if I have the flexibility. But 9 times out of 10, if a building principal or somebody try to do that and their results are not there, they will get danged for that, and they probably won't have a job. So you see people kind of staying away from doing these things because they have to keep their jobs.
Right. And because this is politics as usual, before we get out of here, I want to ask you, what should we be asking these politicians locally, like your school board? First of all, let me just say this. Know who your school board is, first of all. That's the first step. I know they don't really advertise or market school board elections like they do other elections. And oftentimes, cause I know here, oftentimes it's not even held, in November like other elections. Sometimes it's in the off months, and sometimes you really got to pay attention. And a lot of time, depending on your city, like, because the city I am, it's a one-party controlled city, basically. So your primary is basically your election,
right,
oftentimes.
Right.
So, and then other times it's not even held in November, it's held in off months. So you have to do some research, depending on what city you in, what's your district looking like, what's the policy there. But beyond that, once you find out who your school board members are, what are some of the questions we should be asking them? And what should we be looking for with their answers?
Well, the first question I would ask, as a concerned parent is, number one, do you have any children that attend schools in this area? Or have you ever had any children who attended schools in this area? Number one, why? Because if you end up having people who are on that board and they would not put their child in traditional public schools, why are they making judgment about your children? That's number one. Number two, I would ask them, what are they going to do to prepare students for the 21st century? So what is their vision as a school board that they want to do to prepare children towards the 21st century? And the reason why you have to ask that question is we don't just need board members just sign off on policies or sign off on something that somebody does. We need people who can challenge and also say, hey, Miss Superintendent or Mr. Superintendent, what about A, B, and C. And out in New York, they're doing this. Have we thought about bringing this to our district? That's what we need. We also need, and the third thing I would say, question that I would ask them, how do you define student achievement? And I think once you ask those questions, you will see where their heads are at, where their children go to school at. It's going to be big. How do they define student achievement? It's going to be crucial because you know that Betsy DeVault, that really kind of stumped her when she couldn't really describe what's the difference between achievement and growth, and she could not differentiate between the two. So I think that's critical because when you're making decisions about a life, and let's be real, school districts also, school boards, they get to make the decision where the funding's going. They may say, you know what, we're going to close your school that you attended because of whatever reasons. And when you're closing schools, i.e. Chicago situation, or laying off teachers, that causes a major ripple effect in that city or in that district. So those are some of the questions I would definitely ask.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent question. And I know we always talk about how we need to get our money up and actually start donating to some of these campaigns too, and really have your foot in the door. But before you can even do that, you have to have an agenda and know what to ask. So you can have all the money in the world, but if you're not advocating for the right policies, it's still not going to help us.
Right.
So we kind of got to educate ourselves with that. And is there anything the state can do to help out the situation? So let's just say we have a state senator and is there anything a state senator can do when it comes to local education? I know they can do stuff with higher education in the state, but as far as, elementary school, grammar school, is there anything they can do?
Typically, the only thing that they can really do is funding. They help control what funds are going to come around. So that's how they can kind of get their power. But far as decisions and things of that nature, is literally up to the school board. Now, if a parent wants to sue and go beyond the school board, that's how we get our I.E. Brown versus the Board of Topeka and all of that stuff, where we know Thurgood Marshall resided over that, to where literally he took a whole entire district in a school board to the Supreme Court to say that our schools were separate and unequal. So as far as local politicians, money, funding. That's the only thing that they can really do. Funding.
Okay. And federally too, because we know we had No Child Left Behind. We had Race to the Top. And, under the Bush administration and under the Obama administration. And I think it's safe to say both programs was a failure. Both programs failed.
Right.
So
can I throw this little bit of symbolism at you? And this is okay. Our cars that we drive every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's safe to say that we're driving different cars than we were driving 40 and 50 years ago. Like they're built different, right?
Yeah.
They feel different. The way they accelerate, the type of fuel they use. We have electronic cars, all that thing and all that nature. I say all that to say this: we're trying to treat our education. We can't create a program and just say it's a different car, but it's the same 1950, 1940 car. No matter what I do, if this car has a 1950 Mercedes-Benz engine, I can't make that engine a 2017. No matter how much I clean it up and wash over and all of this. So when you see these programs, and I know that's probably it's probably like a weird little similar to try to use this, but that's what we're doing with education. No matter how much we try to brush stuff off, it always race to the top. Oh, it's No Child Left Behind, and Trump probably gonna come out with his thing. We still have the same issues. We got to change the vehicle. We got to upgrade.
What do you think federally can be done with education, if anything?
I think giving more people the rights to kind of create and do their own thing. I think we're at the place right now, and I hate to say this, but where there are some areas that things are so bad that people remain powerless because of systems that's put in place. So I think that if the federal government can take a look at these schools and these districts that are really hurting, and well, I take that back. I don't think the federal government can do much there, but fund. I think that's up to the people locally. Locally, people got to take control of their area. And the only reason why I say that, because what are the federal government's going to do? Even if the federal government come on and take over, they're going to contract out with somebody who may not be good at all. And so we're still stuck in the same situation. So I was about to say the federal government come on do that, but no. Locally, people got to get engaged. You got to get engaged with your local politics. You got to start going to your school board meetings. You got to start going to your PTA meetings. You need to know what's going on in your building. How are children being prepared for the 21st century? And then if we need to ask the federal government for funds, we do that to help us get there. But the federal government can't help us figure this one out. Right. Because that's why we keep having these programs.
And you know what they do is they add incentives. Yep. So they can't dictate policy, right. But what they can do is if you don't meet this, this, and that, you're not going to get federal funding.
Right.
So they still kind of oftentimes dictate what's happening on a local level.
Right.
Because of that.
Right.
So, I mean, these are the type of questions you got to think about when you go to your town halls, or if you get a candidate, a chance to talk one-on-one with a candidate, or real briefly, or if you call their office, because you can call their office and ask, okay, what do you think about this? What's your position on it? You know, so these are the type of things we got to be asking. And I think this was a great discussion right here. Do anything you want to close with?
No, but I just want to add this. If a lot of this was a lot tonight, try to go to one PTA meeting a school year. If you're not a person who like to go to school like that, go to one PTA meeting. I would say go to at least 5 a year. But also go to every school board meeting. You need to know what is going on and what decisions and choices are being made. Because if you start to go to those meetings and you start to listen, I believe that you will become more engaged in the educational process, which will help a lot of these politicians help make good decisions for our children.
Definitely, definitely. I just want to leave it with this. You know, let's not get lost with higher education, because sometimes we think higher education is just education as a whole, because that's what I've been seeing lately is talk strictly on higher education, which is important, very important, but it's almost a separate discussion from.
It is.
Yeah, it is different. It is different. So
we almost need a part 2. We really almost need a part 2.
Right, right. I mean, I'm down. We can do that.
We can go higher education next week.
Yeah, we might have to do this because we need to break down these issues, man. We really do. And it's important. It is very important because they don't get this every day.
No.
And if you have the expertise in it, like, yes, this definitely need to be talked about.
Yeah, definitely. Because higher education is a whole other beast.
Yes. Yes. Whole different thing. It's a lot of things to go into that. Mm-hmm. So, but until next week, I think that is a good idea. We might get into part 2 next week. Don't worry. You know, I know we ain't getting to the FBI stuff and healthcare. There's other stuff to talk about, but that's why we got Always Black podcast as well. You know, we talk about all that. We might touch on a little bit of that next week, but a part 2 of education is definitely needed, and I think we need to do that next week.
Okay, definitely.
All right. So this is Sue. I mean Shah. I mean Desaline. Mean Nice. Do I have another name? I think that's it. These are self-proclaimed names too. Yes, I named myself. Why not? So, and Brother Nate, we signing off.
Yes.
Peace.